Chapter 2. My biggest mistake. The first place where I learned about pizza making was my mom's kitchen. In the house I grew up in, we had a tradition. Every Saturday night, all the 5 members would gather around the kitchen table, facing a huge chunk of homemade pizza. My mom was usually the pizza maker in charge, but from time to time I was allowed to do my part. Maybe just open a can of tomatoes or chop some mozzarella, or dissolve the yeast in water, until one day, finally, I had the chance to do everything by myself, under Mama's watchful eye, of course. Following the direction of my mom and the recipe of my grandma, I was able to prepare a decent dough from scratch. Then I stretched it, then I put the toppings, and then I baked it. Ladies and gentlemen, Saturday's dinner is ready, and I made it myself. I made the first pizza at the age of 12 and it felt great. I even told my dad that I was going to be a pizzaiolo as a grown-up, but of course he laughed at me and told me I would become an architect or an engineer. By the way, having made that first pizza didn't mean that I became the official pizzaiolo of the house. But to my kids' eyes, my career officially kickstarted that very day. To be honest, it took a long time before I had the chance to make pizza from scratch again, but every Saturday I was still there beside my mother, helping her as usual and gaining more and more confidence in my skills. Eventually, over time, the roles between me and my mom basically reversed. This happened so slowly I didn't even notice. I wish I had an official investiture ceremony and a special prize for my patience, but all I received was the wooden board instead. Only a few years later, I realized how precious it was. Fast forward 20 years later, eventually I reached a point where I had baked plenty of pizzas at home, collected relatives, friends and neighbors' recipes, read several cookbooks with tips about pizza making, saved on my bookmarks a fair amount of links to pizza-related websites. At the time, the internet was still young, but you could still find quite a few sources. In short, I thought I knew everything there was to know about pizza making, but today I know I was a bit too confident. So when I entered Mario's pizzeria for the first time, I thought that I would have been able to serve the first pizza to a customer in a matter of a few days, if not a few hours. How bloody wrong I was. But wait, who's this Mario guy? My second but most important learning place was the pizza shop I used to buy takeaway from, and its owner's name was precisely Mario. No, he's not a plumber, he doesn't have a mustache, and he hasn't a brother called Luigi. He was the main pizza maker, and I became his friend pretty quickly, since he cooked my dinner at least once a week. From time to time, while I was waiting for my pizza, I used to ask my new friend to teach me some trick or to explain me some behind the scene. I asked once, I asked twice. Mario always replied to me with the same words. Whenever you want, I will be happy to teach you. But I never took him seriously. Actually, I didn't even take myself seriously. I was only shooting sentences. Until one day... Mario, your pizza is way better than the one I make myself. You should explain to me how the heck you do it. Okay, Fabio, you always ask, but you never listen to me. The fact is, I could really use 2 extra hands. Would you come and help me here? I won't pay a cent, but I'll teach you all you need to become a real pizzaiolo. Moreover, you will eat pizza every night. You will cook it yourself. Yes, when can I start? The very next day, at the end of my usual shift, I officially entered the pizza-making wonderland. My first experience in a restaurant was like going back in time to the age of 12, with Mario playing the role of my mom. Probably this went a little bit too far, because while he was explaining what to do next, I often would look at him and picture him with my mom's haircut, spectacles, and even with her skirt. It took me a while to admit it to myself, and it was hard to do it. But the truth was that everything I knew about pizza was only a teeny tiny fraction of what I would need to know if I wanted to become a professional. I had to deal with the fact that no matter how much you know, there will always be somebody that knows more than you do. I guess this lesson was useful outside of the restaurant too. Here's the biggest mistake I made during that experience. I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't. However, this did not throw me down. Indeed, it stimulated me a lot. Being a very curious guy, I was excited to put on my student hat again, and I was ready to learn all the new concepts that I would be taught from that day on. The very first thing that was clear to me was that I should have learned to do my shopping correctly. Whenever I felt like making pizza in my house, which used to happen pretty often, I was interested in the toppings I would have used more than anything else. So I would have headed at the supermarket to grab a random bag of flour, a random tomato thing, etc. Now I know that to make a very good pizza, an extra effort is needed. Not a big one though, just learn the difference between the different types of flour. This is the starting point. Of course, we will not talk here about the flours used by professionals in the restaurants. We will only point out what we need to know to make a good pizza in our home. Think about how many kinds of flour you know. Plain flour, self-raising, wholemeal, gluten-free, and then soya, rice, spelt, corn, semolina, you name it. They are different from each other and you could use them in different ways and recipes, including pizza. However, when we first approach the shelf at the supermarket and reach out to grab a bag of flour, there is only one big difference we need to consider. Did you ever even notice? You see strong and very strong written on some bags. Most of the time it's bread flour. If none of these two characteristics is written, then that particular flour is considered weak. This is the case of plain or all-purpose flour. Please note that different countries use different classification names for the flour. Many aspiring pizza makers worldwide are aware of the 00 flour, usually referred to as the best flour you can use to make pizza at home. However, 00 is just a name we Italians use for a certain type of flour. We classify the flour according to its degree of refinement, from higher to lower. Type 00, 0, 1, 2 and wholemeal. But this is not enough to understand if the product is or isn't good to bake a good pizza, as we still need to know how strong the flour is. That's why in this book I will only refer to the categories mentioned above. The weak versus strong flour question is very important for us. We must consider it first and foremost because different strength means different time. The stronger the flour, the longer we will be allowed to wait for the dough to be ready to be cooked. In fact, a stronger flour will produce a greater amount of gluten, which will trap the gas produced by the yeast for longer, so our dough will rise nice and high. Will this be of any help? Why would we want to be allowed more rising time for our dough? There are two main reasons. First of all, your pizza will be easier to stretch when the time to bake will come. Those components, such as sugar, starches and protein themselves, need time to break down into simpler elements. We refer to this decaying action as maturation. If we give our dough enough time to mature, our base won't put up much resistance. Moreover, this process will affect in a positive way the digestibility of our final product. Hence, also our stomach's job will be smoother, not only ours. The second reason why we want our dough to rise longer is because we need some fermentation. Now, knowing all the chemistry behind fermentation processes beyond the scope of this book. For the purpose of home bakers like us, it's enough to know that thanks to the fermentation, the dough will develop a slightly acidic touch. This will turn into taste and flavor when we will bake. The different strength will also affect the amount of water absorbed by the flour. Starting with the same amount of water, a strong flour will absorb more than a weak flour. Consequently, you would use on average around 6-7% less. This feature is extremely overlooked. Many recipes do not specify the kind of flour you should use, or worse, they say you can use any flour. That's why your pizza is different every time you make it, even though you always follow to the letter the same recipe. Most probably you just bought a different flour. By bringing this info into our household's kitchen, you will be able to prepare a better pizza, assessing what to do, when and why. The starting point is that you should give your dough much more time to rise than the most common recipes suggest to do. Also, you must manage your time differently depending on the kind of flour we want to use. As an indication, we can consider that plain all-purpose flours matures in 3 to 4 hours after you finish kneading, being weak. A strong flour will take 8 to 10 hours instead. Finally, a very strong flour would easily take 24 hours to mature, and you will not be wrong at all to wait longer, even 2 days, 3 or more. Please consider that these timings are just approximations, but they will help you to fit the pizza preparation in your schedule. Personally, I wouldn't suggest to use plain flour for your homemade pizza. By the time it will be mature, it will not be fermented enough, hence it will be less tasty. You could think, okay then, I'm going to wait longer so my dough will be fermented enough. The problem is that at the point, the dough will be really mature. As a consequence, its consistency will be really soft and it will not be easy to stretch a nice pizza evenly. Evenly is the key word here. The dough would indeed increase its size very easily because of its weakness, but you will likely mark dips and pits and holes on your base. You need to be more experienced to handle a soft dough and stretch an even base. In the meanwhile, just use strong flour. Thanks to the longer time it will allow us, we will be able to reach the right balance between maturation and fermentation without ending up with a brittle dough ball. If you wanted to, you could even knead today and bake tomorrow, just like we do in most pizzerias. As a matter of fact, I recommend to proceed this way. That's actually how I often do it myself.